I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
One afternoon, 2 years after having first met, to be precise, at the 11th hour, the 58th minute, the 44th second, Saturday, September the 1st, 1923, Kaneko Fumiko and Bakyol, while getting some imported ginseng ready for sale, heard a large explosion outside a small house which they rented. The whole world was shaking. Had their comrades finally gotten their hands on that throw bomb from Shanghai?
이번 건 좀 센데. 인삼은 없고.
Unfortunately, they quickly realized that this was not the case. It was the beckoning spectre of Protofascism, which now had reached the island in the Pacific, together with the Kanto Daijishin, the great Kanto Earthquake of 1923. Here is an initial eyewitness report from Commander R.H. Griffin of the SS Dongola, anchored in the Yokohama harbor. A ship fittingly named after Her Majesty the Queen's brutal massacre of some 50,000 Mahdist Muslims in Sudan under the order of Herbert Kitchener, the scorched earth colonialist who industriously expanded the concentration camps of Africa, long before the notion ever manifested in the Calvinist unconscious of Adolf Eichmann. A massacre so barbaric that even Winston Churchill raised an eyebrow, which might give you an idea of what the economic reasons for not leaving any wounded in your own colony might look like.
Attention, attention, this is the SS Dongola. At 11:55 a.m. our ship commenced to tremble and vibrate violently, and on looking towards the shore it was seen that a terrible earthquake was taking place. Buildings were collapsing in all directions, and in a few minutes nothing could be seen for clouds of dust. When these cleared away, fire could be seen starting in many directions, and in half an hour the whole city was in flames. The wind, which had been force 5 at 11 a.m., rapidly increased to force 8, direction south-southwest. The smoke and heat blown directly over the ship and the harbor was intense.
There was great confusion both in the burning streets and in the ruling corridors of the parliament, as the Prime Minister, Marshal Admiral and Viscount Kato Tomasaburo had died a week earlier. We will return shortly in some detail to some of the involved characters who had, let's say, extra invested interest in this confusion. But for now, let's account that the Minister of Interior, Mizuno Rentaro, who had an important background in Japanese mining, was put in charge. On the second day, the 2nd of September, Mizuno Rentaro informed the emergency appointed new Prime Minister, Uchida Kōsai, later to be president of the South Manchuria Railway Company, which bears a certain connotation for the informed, but for now, again, let's just note another man of heavy industry who had no real idea of what was going on. Rentaro's planned priorities had less to do with natural seismic phenomenon and more to do with leftist Korean so-called malcontents, which when applied would turn the earthquake disaster into a Nippon Kristallnacht. I will make reoccurring use of Nazi correlated comparisons from now on, which might not be the absolutely most accurate, but it will bring in Western listeners to a more familiar chronology and structural narrative. You see, I'm of the opinion that you can generalize when it comes to fascist if you know what you're doing. It is a bit like etiological research. Martial law is declared as of 6 p.m. September the 2nd. A number of Korean rebels are mustering radicals. Veterans Association, firefighters, Young Men's Associations should stay vigilant and take measures in contingencies. Before we go on, as promised, to take a look at the architects behind the event. What took place after this is best recounted through eyewitnesses. The Yokohama District Court's history of the earthquake includes recollections by 3 separate individuals that further illustrate how word of a permission to kill spread throughout the city. A judge recounts being ordered by a passerby near the Sakuragicho train station on the 2nd of September to wear a red armband. Asked why, the passerby replied that it was to prevent his being mistaken for a Korean, and that, quote, the police chief has issued an order that it is permissible to kill anyone who appears to be Korean, end of quote. The following day, near the Yokohama train station, the judge was stopped by a vigilante and was told to change the color of his armband to white because Koreans had started wearing red armbands. Another judge recounts being told to wear a white armband by a vigilante on the 3rd of September and being informed that, quote, a government order, fure, has been issued that we may immediately kill anybody who appears to be Korean, end of quote. The wife of another judge recounts members of the local youth group telling all Japanese on the night of 2nd of September, quote, we have heard that approximately 300 Koreans have entered Honmoku to burn the city. Anybody who does not respond properly to your questions can be considered Korean and killable. Everybody be vigilant, end of quote. A 6th grade student recalled, quote, the policeman told us that Koreans are coming with knives, so we needed to kill them, end of quote. A report by the Yokohama Martial Law Headquarters includes the comment by the chief of the Kotobuki police station that police officers may indeed have said something like, quote, it is permissible to kill Koreans, end of quote. It should not be assumed that such calls for watchfulness and cooperation were merely issued to the public at large or acted upon only by private citizens responding ad hoc. Contrary to official Japanese accounts portraying the vigilantes as rogue groups that formed spontaneously in reaction to rumors, the police themselves had established community vigilante groups in Kanagawa Prefecture beginning roughly 1 year prior to the earthquake. These groups conducted joint activities with the local police, participating in arrests of suspected criminals, and they formed the organizational basis for the rapid proliferation of vigilante groups after the earthquake. And mind you, this is where my previous analogy to the Kristallnacht is somewhat insufficient, since the right-wing forces which are still in power in Japan today have not really admitted anything of this, which at the same time justifies my comparison to more established and admitted records in the study of fascist development from thugs, hooligans and gangsters to, well, thugs, hooligans and gangsters, but with uniform and wages. Police permissions to kill Koreans was reported in Tokyo as well. For example, an open letter in October to the Mita police chief expresses outrage at the government's hypocritical arrest and trials of vigilantes after the massacre. The writer recounts that his neighborhood watch group had formed in response to a police officer's order of vigilance against an impending Korean attack. The officer instructed them, quote, "Bring any suspected Koreans to the police station. If they resist arrest, you are free to kill them." End of quote. Quote, "Was he talking in his sleep, or is he going to hide behind the lack of evidence and deny it?" Question mark. The writer asks angrily. A resident of Tanashi in western Tokyo recounts that the police chief ordered male residents to arm themselves and, quote, "kill any Koreans who enter the neighborhood." End of quote. Another resident recounts that the police chief visited his house and instructed him to, quote, "kill any Koreans he found." End of quote. Such directives, at times communicated in person by police officers and of other times transmitted through rumors or posted official notices, were not wild rumors arising from mass panic. They were, rather, official pronouncements transmitted directly through police channels. Arirang International Broadcasting, Korea's leading global broadcaster, announced in 2016 that official documents have been found in the resident house of the Korean ambassador to Japan, documents which raises the figures of massacred Koreans to 6,000. Remember here that actual declared war is still more than a decade away, so one wonders how the ruling class was going to explain such an alarmingly high number to its own people, let alone the international community. Well, if you think about it, how would anyone go about explaining that in the 20th century, if not by declaring an Ausnahmezustand and informing the greater public that the activities of leftist elements have risen to a level of national security? Tried and tested methods by now in the second millennium, but still prototypes at this time in our story. The listener will also recall that in September 1923, the Black Shirts have just marched on Rome, less than a year earlier, and in a few months, Adolf Hitler and Erich Ludendorff were going to fail in their miscalculated Bekada putsch, though conditions had seemed right at the time. So this 1922-23 period, when Lenin suffered his third stroke, lost his voice and had to retire, was also the great year of Ausnahmezustand, you say? Where have I heard that before? Well, if you, like me, dear listener, have skipped reading Agamben and instead gone straight for most of what the arch-jurist of the Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei himself had to say, then I wonder if you notice something odd about the famous political theological formula "Souverän ist wer über den Ausnahmezustand entscheidet." The sovereign is he who decides on the exception. I mean, the formula is odd because if you read Carl Schmitt carefully, the state of exception is also that which calls for the sovereign as a necessity. It would thus seem, as far as my logic allows me to reason, that the Caesar causes himself to exist, which, mystical as it is, works fine ideologically. I mean, who needs objective causes when you got the acoustics of the Circus Maximus, right? But let's not get a cult just yet. Causes himself to exist? Nah, sounds like something from Himmler's collection of the Upanishads. So, according to a concrete analysis of concrete situations, let's instead recognize that fascists are opportunists who exploit things like earthquakes, famines, discontent, and let's also note, to our own guilt, failed halfway leftist revolutions. In the Kanto Earthquake, they certainly had their natural disaster served on a silver plate, since its seismic phenomenon only occurs every 200 years. To put this now in a specifically Japanese zusammenhang, or context, you might have recognized the code word Korean malcontents, Pfute Senjin. about those at the very center of the rumor, who were believed to be raping and poisoning the wells. The construction of this enemy was the primary fuel for the folk phantasmagoria used to explain why the sacrificial spirit, the Gisei Tekisei, had to be elevated. This last code word, sometimes it's warrior spirit or fighting spirit. And this is where Bakyol and Kaneko Fumiko re-enter our story in the larger picture of Imperial Japan's road to total war. These two categories, Schmittian categories, that of the enemy, Koreans, and the friend, the sacrificial spirit, are stated as two overlapping goals in a December 1923 internal police document titled On Policing and Other Activities After the Earthquake, Shinsaigo no Keibi Sonota no Yokkyo. Fumiko, in her nihilist zero fucks shall be given style, changed the name of our subject matter group, the Black Wave Society, once again, and claimed when the police came to round the rest of them up that she and Bakyol were part of an anarchist duo called the Malcontents, who had plotted to kill the emperor. This wasn't necessarily true. It seems the secret police put her up to it. Some of the group members were tortured to death, so we can't rule that out either. With the slightly mentally deranged couple anyway, and I say that in a loving sense, the police had found a perfect excuse to build their case and brought on a big trial with the bombastically outspoken leftists. They put the malcontents and the other members of the Black Wave Society in, quote, protective custody, end of quote, which once again is code for a larger project of rounding up leftists all over the country, some 30,000 to be rough. About the same number of Jews sent to the concentrationslager after the Kristallnacht, though in Berlin only about 100 were killed on spot, not 6,000. And I mean, with that, I just want to make clear the sheer scope of this historical event, which is still being repressed.
가야 할 사람이기에 안녕 안녕이라고 말해야지 돌아설 사람이기에 안녕이라고 말해야지 울먹이는 마음일랑 나 혼자 사귀면서 웃으며 말해야지 안녕 안녕 가야 할 사람이기에 안녕 안녕이라고 말해야지 안녕 안녕 가야 할 사람이
Well then, now, before we go on to the court halls, let's look, as promised, at those who were the authors of the operation, which was to be substantiated with the trial. And would it surprise you that the big names all had a past of being a part of that massive expansion of the police apparatus in colonized Korea, which we mentioned in the first episode? Not really, right? Well, first out is Nishizawa Katsuto. A vicious motherfucker if there ever was one. It's hard to find a lot of info about him, even in Japanese sources. But it's safe to say that he was the head of the Tokobetsu Koto Keisatsu, or Tokkō for short. That is, the special higher police division. The Nazi equivalent, I guess, would be SIPO, the Sicherheitspolizei. Takagi Takeo, a famous submarine commander, who seems to be a playable character in some naval computer video games out there, once said, "If you say Tokkō, even a crying child falls silent." Once when I talked to my father-in-law about the latter head of Tokkō, Genki Abe, whom if you ever wondered what Heinrich Himmler looked like if he was Japanese, then go check him out. Anyway, my father-in-law said, the Shizo Keisatsu, the thought police. Bad dinner conversation, you know? Anyways, the Tokkō was the civil version of the more famous military police, the Kenpeitai, and the smaller Navy Tokeitai. The Tokkō was part of the Home Ministry, which is important since you will recall that the Prime Minister had died a week before the earthquake, and the man in charge, informing the seemingly clueless emergency Prime Minister, was Home Minister Mizuno Rentaro. Convenient, right? It gets better when some accounts suggest that Tokkō was in fact founded in 1923. And if you think I can't squeeze anything more into what I am now calling the great year of the Ausnahmezustand, you know, other than Lenin's stroke, the Bekele Putsch, and the March on Rome, well, in a few months before the quake, the Tokkō had brought to light for the first time that there was a Japanese Communist Party, which needed to be outlawed and arrested under a new peace preservation law. Then after the massacre, having added Japanese communists to the list of Korean malcontents, consent was manufactured and Tokkō sections were established in Hokkaido, Kanagawa, Nagano, Aichi, Kyoto, Hyogo, Yamaguchi, and Fukuoka, making a total of 10 after a great special speech by Mizuno Rentaro, once again the Home Minister and man in charge in Tokyo as the city was burning up, to expand not only the Tokkō but all kinds of new police forces. So what was Tokkō Police Chief Nishizawa up to during the days of the massacre? As the informed man that he was, being the head of intelligence, he knew that the major place of workers' organization in Tokyo was Nakamura-cho in Kotobuki Police Precinct, home to the most organized sections of the Japanese and Korean proletariat. It was also the home of the powerful local labor activist Yamaguchi Seiken, who had united Korean and Japanese longshoremen and dock workers of the Yokohama harbor for May Day rallies 3 years in a row. When the quake hit, the Union Proletarians of Yamaguchi Seiken had organized a relief station that provided food to people, since, well, you know by now that the army and the police had other priorities. Later, Yamaguchi Seiken would be blamed for having spread the rumors which led to the massacre. I don't know how many times you can backstab one person, but poor this guy, seriously. To the south of Yamaguchi's and the organized workers' relief stations, across the Negishi Bridge, the main buildings and walls of Yokohama prison collapsed in the earthquake, and its approximately 900 convicts were freed for 24 hours from the evening of 1st of September. Eyewitnesses have reported seeing them being armed by the police. According to Nishizaka's 1926 book, it was the Yamate police who first reported rumors of Korean attackers in Yokohama at around 7 p.m. on the 1st of September. Their warnings came from Nakamura-cho and Nigishi-cho, i.e. the, quote, socialist nest, end of quote, which we just mentioned. And the report spoke of, quote, approximately 200 Korean invaders, end of quote, who were, quote, setting fires, raping, and poisoning wells, end of quote. Nishizaka praises by name the area's officer standing in for the vacationing police chief at the time of the disaster as a paragon of sacrificial spirit, who courageously carried out his duties in the face of overwhelming difficulties. Strange here that there is somebody once again standing in place for somebody else. Among their deeds was participation in a massacre at Nakamura Bridge, located approximately 1 kilometer north of the Yokohama prison, and the site of a Kotobuki police box and of a food relief station set up by the local youth group. So not the proletarians' relief station. The resultant carnage, according to a 1971 recollection by an eyewitness, turned the color of the river bright red. The post-massacre investigation conducted by the Korean Disaster Relief Team reports 103 massacred Korean bodies discovered in this area. Probably feeling pretty good with himself regarding the evening's work of the first day, having finally dealt with the dock workers in a way that normal circumstances can't allow. At about 3 a.m., I mean, what a fucking vampire, on the 2nd of September, Nishizaka left Yokohama Park and met with Governor Yasukochi Asakichi, that is the former head of the Police Affairs Bureau in the Home Ministry under Mizuno, at his residence before heading to Tokyo on foot to request troops and report to the Home Ministry headquarters on the situation in Yokohama. On his way to the Imperial capital, he visited the Kanagawa police station in northern Yokohama to, quote, survey the situation just in case and to urge vigilance, end of quote. He then continued his trek north, ordering reinforcements to areas in need of assistance as he proceeded. Shortly after his visit, the Kanagawa precinct was the site of a murderous spree. Wielding swords and riding bicycles, members of the nearby Koyasu, the neighborhood watch group, alerted residents that, quote, an order has just been issued from the police that all Koreans are to be killed, end of quote. The massacre continued for 3 days, with the bodies of the slain Koreans abandoned along the railroad tracks. A judge from the Yokohama District Court witnessed the mutilated corpses in the area and later wrote, quote, it was such a cruel method of killing that I cannot bring myself to describe it, end of quote. According to a later investigation conducted by the Korean Disaster Relief Team, the biggest recorded massacre in Yokohama took place near that Kanagawa police station, which is also located near the railroad tracks, approximately at the midway point between the Kanagawa and Higashi Kanagawa train stations, where you also have had the martial law headquarters on the northern edge of the city. A Yokohama District Court judge relates having heard gunshot in this area throughout the night of the troops' arrival on the 3rd September. These accounts shed some light on the meaning behind Nishizaka's cryptic praise of the troops, where he said that, achievements are exceeding wartime operations after the triumphant entry into his city. And as General Tanaka Gichi, who later served as Prime Minister, wrote in the Military Reservists' Journal in November 1923, the events after the earthquake provided a welcome, quote, great shock, end of quote, to a people, quote, sliding into literary indulgence, end of quote, leading them back to the correct path of, quote, repentance and self-defense, end of quote, and allowing them to, quote, heighten their unique warrior spirit, end of quote. Less is known about what our friend Home Minister Mizuno Rentaro was up to, together with the Tokyo Police Commissioner Akaike Atsushi and Tokyo Governor Uzami Katsuo. And once again, these were all in leadership positions in Korea during the expansion of the military and the police apparatus after the May 1st movement, which we dealt with in the first episode. We have also already mentioned that he held speeches, Rentaro that is, in the aftermath of the state of exception before the year was over, urging on the transformation of the vigilante groups to more uniformed elements of a new vision. A vision fanatically expressed as, quote, supreme manifestation of neighborhood mutual help and mutual love of the native people, end of quote. Now, I guess we once again can draw correlations between the Freikorps and the gradual handing out of SA, SS and SD, etc. emblems. And considering this structural development, I think this is an excellent opportunity to quote Antonio Gramsci when he says, quote, they will continue to introduce to everyday social life an ever increasing personnel, end of quote. This quote has been with me ever since I first read Gramsci some decade ago, and I think it's important to know that Gramsci's heroic contribution to the theory with capital T consists of him giving us a unique insight stripped of all the sensationalist upbeat gore, since he was writing under censorship and in a way had to develop a crypto-Marxist critique of fascism from a prison cell. So I urge you to forget 1984 and the romanticism of totalitarianism and pay instead close attention to what this odd-looking little Italian was trying his hardest to tell us, and why the Mussolini judge said that they had to stop this brain from thinking for decades to come. So what this particular formula is stressing is that in the fascist universe, everything and everyone has a title. Everyone has a mandate and a fixed objective within its social formation. This goes well together with Neo-Confucianism, since one of its highest dreams is that all subjects devote themselves to the written destiny of their own name. John Carpenter is a carpenter and not a filmmaker. Agent Smith is a blacksmith and not a computer virus. Apart from the brutality of putting the very worst a society can breed forward on a payroll, in a way it is also the politico-aesthetic structuring of pseudo-activities and the consequence of its incompetence to account for its own contradictions leads to war, and later, according to Gramsci, on the higher levels, when channeling of the death drive, so to speak, becomes more sophisticated, a gendarme night watchman state. This is what freaked me out the most about the pandemic in the liberal world. More so than the stories about where the virus might have come from and what might be in the vaccine, but rather precisely liberalism's reaction to an outside invisible enemy. All of a sudden there were hordes of new titles appearing everywhere in civil society, and even mandates like etiologists became highly political. So what else did Rentaro get up to? Well, he embarked on a great purge of the universities of leftist elements as the Minister of Education between 1927 and 1928. And then after some further digging, I found an interesting document labeled number 250, which was handed out to all attorneys by investigator R.H. Larsch at the Tokyo trials in 1947. According to this document, Rentaro was the honorary vice chairman of the Dai Nippon Koa Dome, the Alliance of the Great Japan's Uprising, an organization in the highest category of 3 by the trial, deemed ultra-nationalist and recognized as a merger of 60 previous organizations, secret societies, sects, and so on, of similar convictions, which then ceased to exist under their previous names, 9 of them being known on record as having publicly urged war with the US. Strange that with such a record he was let go from the trial. We will return again to the Tokyo trial and its strangeness in the next episode. But for now, I can't help myself pointing out another strange thing in the same document, where investigator H.R. Large cautions the reader from assuming that all societies on the list are to be deemed dangerous. He says, quote, "Some are no more harmful than the Rotary or Kiwanis clubs."
Alarm! 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 Achtung! Sie greifen an!
Yeah, seriously, somebody tell me, why is it that the Rotary, even during the Tokyo trials, is heralded as this archetypical idea of a secret society which doesn't get up to anything? Just, it's just really important men meeting very important men, doing whatever it is that important men do. Anyways, for now, in order to get back to Kaneko Fumiko and Bakiol, let's recognize that Rentaro was crucial in putting their trial together. The young couple just so happens to fit the next stage in the media apparatus's reproduction of knowledge of the enemy. In Rentaro's and the other police officials' mind, the public needed a more dangerous villain-looking image, other than what was now being spread in a new rumor of countless innocent Koreans being murdered in the capital.
Sir, what does it say? This is the number of Korean massacred during the big earthquake in Kanto. Is this true? Yes. The actual number may be even higher if you include unconfirmed deaths.
Oh, really?
Yes. This. Here. Please leave it.
Both parties wanted to make use of the trial for their own benefit and to promote their cause. The beckoning fascist forces, of course, by this time already controlled most of the channels through which this story would be told. But that didn't stop the convicts from trying. On the first day of the trial, the 2 anarchists both showed up in ceremonial Korean dresses to piss off the professional chauvinists present. A first move to give a certain elegance to the ideas which they had come to defend. Kaneko Fumiko held long speeches regarding everything pathetically hypocritical that was to be found in the society that had made her. The emperor and the imperial family was a symbol of a larger structure, so disdainful that she again and again declared that she would gladly die in her own rebellion against it. If you want to prevent an incident materializing, now is the time. You'd better kill me. However many years you keep me in prison, if you let me out into society once more, without fail, I'll show you I can start afresh. I'll show you I can annihilate myself and save you the trouble. Come, send this body off mine anywhere you like, even to the scaffold, to Hachioji prison. Bodies only die once, do as you please. If you do something like that with me, it will just be proof positive for me that I've lived my life to the full. I'll be satisfied with that. At another time, she rose from her seat, declaring in a cool, yet passionate and dignified manner that still managed to upset the pretentious, reserved way of the bureaucrats in the judicial hall. I know Buck, and I love him. Whatever his faults and weaknesses, I love him. Now I unconditionally approve of the mistakes Buck made that affected me as well. So to Buck's friends I say, If this incident seems stupid to you, go ahead and laugh at us both. It's only our affair. And to the officials I say, please go right ahead and hurl us both under the guillotine. If I can die with Bak, I'll be content. And to Bak I say, even if the sentence handed down by the officials should separate us, I'll never let you die alone. Later, when the couple had been sentenced to death and the emperor pardoned them, she tore the pardon to pieces, making it clear that such grace was a ridiculous display of impotence, attempting power. The national papers, though, said she cried with joy while thanking the heavenly sovereign. In a poem, Fumiko wrote, "My soul will perish, and yet, washing my hands of the ugliness of the human world is fine by me." It's hard to know what was going through the mind of the young girl during her final time in prison. Helene Bowen Radeker, whose book I have linked in the description, has done an excellent job of portraying the back and forth of her philosophy as she dealt with the highest contradictions of all thinking subjects, samsarically trapped in the symbolic order. What is death? How should one die? Is there such a thing as a beautiful death? Is there such a thing as a rebellion in suicide against those who want to see you dead? Then on the morning of 31st of July, 1926, the news headlines in Tokyo read, "From a hemp rope tied to iron bars, death by hanging in the bright morning sunshine. Kaneko Fumiko hanged herself in prison under the very nose of those checking on her every 10 minutes or so." Bakyol survived, and among her other surviving comrades of the Black Wave Club, a conclusion was never reached as to whether she, Kaneko Fumiko, killed herself or if she was suicided, as we now say in post-Epstein times. And with that mystery, the mystery of Kaneko Fumiko's death, I can't help myself to add something even more mysterious, something of the occult. Everyone who knows a bit about natural disasters, and it goes without saying that more and more of us are of course forced to know about them today. Well, what we know is that we do to some degree predict the arrival of a hurricane, a snowstorm, or a possible flood. Scientists can also predict the risk of a volcanic eruption or the effects of solar flares. However, one kind or category still remains officially out of reach, and that is earthquakes. The late David Graeber, in his last book, put forward a formula to replace the catch-all term of the state in the common discourse that is the critique of power relations. The formula is based upon 3 orders of domination. One of them is the access to knowledge. To remain somewhat on topic, we could bring to mind the primitive image of the Mayan priest class who vulgarized the legacy of the Olmecs and used their esoteric knowledge of the planetary movements to orchestrate great public human sacrifices in connection to the naturally occurring state of exception that we call solar eclipses, as to bridge the gap between the cosmic and the political. Considering what an important year 1923 was for the international fascist movement, I guess you see where I'm going with this. Because there are scientists, such as physicist, chemist and writer Helmut Tribuch, who in his 1984 book, When the Snakes Awake, have collected many historical anecdotes that speak of changes in the behavior of animals before a tremor. The oldest event collected by Tribuch dates from 373 BC, when snakes, ferrets and mice left the Greek town of Hellis 2 days before the occurrence of an earthquake and tsunami that submerged the city. This might come across as a bit too shamanistic for our positivist liberal understanding of modern science, though I don't think it would stop the sectarian right-wingers of the 1920s. Nor has it stopped the British biologist Rachel Gran, who has published several studies documenting how different species in different places, including toads and cows in Italy or rodents and tapirs in the Andes, have modified their behavior before an earthquake. With the collaboration of geophysicist Friedman Freund from the NASA Amen Research Center and the SETI Institute, Grant has linked these changes with disturbances in the ionosphere due to electrical phenomena in the rocks under stress, which in turn can alter the chemistry of the water. This seems to be pretty basic empirical research, which could be carried out by any observant naturalist or lineage of such occupation, as long as they lived in a time of bookkeeping. Japan and the Coordinating Committee for Earthquake Prediction, the CCEP, remains today the most cutting edge in the field, a field which in Japan is a very popular topic for conspiracy theories. The critical culmination of such theories is of course the Aum Shinrikyo, which we will return to in a future episode of our chronology here in the Far East. Now I'm going to leave this highly speculative notion for now and instead go on to thank all of you who are listening and writing comments. You are the prime motivators of this show. I will leave my email in the description and encourage more of you to write to me with your opinions, as many of you already have. I also want to let you know that for a while I will only release an episode bi-weekly. I have a lot to do with my little boy, and I don't want to cut down on the quality of the show just to keep pumping out new episodes. I'm certain that you have other sources for that. So again, thank you very much, and see you in 2 weeks. And until then, keep reading, keep listening to good music, do some sitting, and let it be known far and wide that Kaneko Fumiko is still in Tushita Heaven, teaching sentient beings.